A mountain's heart holds a hall of perfect silence. This is the world of enigmatic rock-cut chambers, where entire temples and tombs were not built, but revealed by removing everything else. By the end of this journey, you will understand the astonishing human ingenuity required to carve a legacy directly into the bones of the earth. How could ancient planners see a finished cathedral inside a solid cliff face with no room for error? What profound purpose drove cultures to spend generations hollowing out the living rock? We will explore the forgotten methods and hidden meanings behind these subterranean marvels, from the sun-baked facades of Petra to the echoing depths of India's sacred caves. What does it mean to create something meant to last for eternity? That first strike into the cliff face was an act of absolute commitment. While traditional builders add piece by piece, stacking stone upon timber, the creators of these chambers worked in reverse. Their medium was not brick or beam, but solid geology itself. This is the ancient art of subtractive architecture, a discipline defined not by assembly, but by revelation. Think of it as the ultimate act of sculptural vision. A conventional architect looks at an empty plot and imagines a structure rising from the ground. But a master of rock-cut design stood before a monolithic wall of granite or sandstone and had to visualize the grand hall, the intricate column, the vaulted ceiling already hidden inside. Their task was not to build, but to carefully, meticulously remove every single piece of stone that was not the final chamber. This fundamental reversal of the creative process imposed a unique and unforgiving law. There was no margin for a major error. In a built structure, a cracked stone can be replaced, a leaning wall can be buttressed, but here, if a sculptor cut too deep or misjudged the angle of a ceiling, the mistake was permanent. The stone that was removed was gone forever. This demanded a level of planning we can scarcely comprehend without modern tools. It required other artisans would move in for the refinement. With finer chisels and points, they would smooth walls, carve steps, and create the breathtaking details that make these sites so unforgettable. This is how the incredible column capitals in places like the caves of Ellora in India came to be. Every floral motif and divine figure patiently coaxed from the living rock by countless individual strikes. The success of this entire endeavor, however, hung on a single critical factor: the consistent quality of the stone itself. A hidden flaw, a sudden change in density, could ruin years of work in an instant. This method forged an intimate, almost conversational relationship between the human and the earth. It was a partnership built on profound patience, a deep understanding of material, and the unwavering belief that a masterpiece was waiting inside, if only one had the resolve to set it free. But what happens when the stone refuses to yield? When the rock is not soft sandstone, but the unyielding, crystalline heart of granite? Here, the hammer and point would simply shatter against an immovable surface. For this challenge, ancient engineers devised a brilliant solution that turned the stone's own nature against it, a method rooted not in force but in patient leverage. They mastered the physics of fracture. The process began with meticulous precision. Craftsmen would drill or chisel a line of closely spaced holes along the exact path where they wanted the rock to split. Into each of these holes they would insert simple, dry wooden wedges. Then came the clever part. They would soak these wedges thoroughly with water. As the wood absorbed the moisture, it began to swell, expanding with a slow, relentless, and incredible pressure. This pressure, trapped within the confined space of the drilled hole, would build and build until the granite could no longer withstand the stress. With a sharp crack that echoed through the quarry, the stone would cleave cleanly along the predetermined line. This was the leverage and wedging system, a form of controlled demolition that allowed them to remove massive ton-weight blocks to define the initial shell of a chamber. We can see dramatic evidence of this technique frozen in time at places like the unfinished obelisk in Aswan, Egypt, where the telltale lines of wedge holes still mark the granite, showing us the precise blueprint of an object that was never freed. This method reveals a sophisticated, almost intuitive grasp of material science. These builders were not just artisans, they were early physicists. They understood the tensile strength of their material, and they knew how to exploit it. They used the natural property of wood, its expansion when wet, to generate forces greater than any human-powered tool could achieve. It was a dialogue with the stone, a way of persuading it to break exactly where they wished. This technique highlights a profound truth about these ancient projects. Their success relied on deep observation and a willingness to work with the environment, not just against it. They turned a fundamental law of nature, expansion, into their most reliable tool. Once these gigantic sections were removed, creating the rough, cavernous void, the finer work of shaping pillars, smoothing walls, and carving deities could begin. But that next phase of creation presented its own monumental challenge, one of darkness and dimension. How do you ensure the interior space you are carving deep within a mountain is perfectly proportioned when you cannot step back to see your work? How do you bring light, and with it, life, into a world of absolute black? There was a third method for the hardest stone, one that felt less like craftsmanship and more like alchemy. When granite refused to yield to wedge or chisel, ancient builders turned to the elemental forces of heat and cold. This was the technique of fire setting, a dramatic and dangerous process that literally shocked the stone into submission. The procedure was deceptively simple in theory, yet demanded immense control. Workers would build a fierce, hot fire directly against the rock face they intended to break. They would let the flames roar, heating the stone's surface to an extreme temperature. Then, at the critical moment, they would douse the blazing rock with a sudden deluge of cold water or sometimes even vinegar. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The rapid, drastic change in temperature created intense stress within the stone, causing its surface layer to fracture and explode off in sharp flakes, a process known as spalling. This thermal shock essentially pre-fractured the granite, creating a weakened zone that could then be worked with chisels and hammers. Controlling this reaction was the true challenge. Too much heat in the wrong place or an uneven quenching could send deep, uncontrollable cracks shooting through the bedrock, ruining the entire architectural plan. While we find clearer evidence of fire setting in ancient mining operations, the logical leap to its use in the earliest, roughest phases of excavating a chamber in impossibly hard rock is compelling. It speaks to a culture's absolute determination. When the mountain would not cooperate, they brought the forge to the mountain. They harnessed the primal contrast of fire and water, two of humanity's oldest tools, and directed their raw power toward a single, patient purpose: to make the immovable move. This pyrotechnic approach underscores a profound truth. These projects were not just acts of devotion or displays of power. They were a form of conversation with the earth, one that could escalate from persuasion to negotiation, using every tool and insight available to achieve a shared vision of space and silence. Yet, even after the grand void of a chamber was carved from the rock, the work was only half complete. The true test of genius lay in the next phase, transforming that raw, dark cavern into a place of precise proportion and awe-inspiring light. How do you carve a perfect column when you are standing in total darkness, surrounded by the very stone you are trying to shape? The answer lies in a forgotten language of lines, shadows, and borrowed sunlight. The master sculptor's vision meant nothing if the mountain itself was flawed. Before the first ceremonial strike, before any team assembled, the most critical phase of the entire endeavor took place in silence. It was the search for the perfect canvas. This was not a matter of finding any cliff, but of identifying a specific, living geology that could cradle a hollowed space for millennia. The builders were, first and foremost, expert geological scouts. Their ideal site was a masterpiece of natural engineering. They sought out vast, unbroken beds of sedimentary rock, like the uniform sandstone of Petra or the soft volcanic tuff in Cappadocia. The key quality was homogeneity. The stone needed to be consistent through and through, free from hidden faults, sudden seams, or layers of dramatically different hardness. A single weak stratum running through a cliff could act like a fault line in an earthquake, dooming the chamber to eventual collapse under its own weight. The scouts would study the face for the telltale signs of stability. They looked for a strong, massive overhang, a natural roof that would protect the future entrance from relentless erosion by rain and wind. The orientation of the cliff was equally deliberate. A north-facing wall in a hot climate, for instance, offered cooler, more stable temperatures inside. But often the alignment was symbolic. A facade might be positioned to catch the first or last light of the sun on a sacred day, transforming the architecture into a celestial calendar. This pre-construction phase was an act of profound intuition and patience. It could take years of observation, of watching how the rock weathered through seasons, of testing its soundness in small, exploratory cuts. Choosing wrong was not a simple setback. It was a generational catastrophe. A hidden fracture could cause a ceiling to fail after decades of work, or a porous layer could allow water to seep in and slowly dissolve the carvings from within. The enduring majesty of a place like Lalibela, with its 11 churches hewn from a single rosy hill, is a testament to this flawless initial judgment. The beauty we see today is the direct result of that ancient, silent conversation between human intention and earthly integrity. They did not conquer the landscape, they listened to it, and in doing so, they found a partner for eternity. Yet, even with the perfect stone selected, the real puzzle began. How do you translate a grand vision from the mind's eye into the absolute darkness of a mountain's interior? How do you ensure that 100 artisans working for 100 years are all carving toward the same invisible goal? This final vision existed only in the mind of the master architect, a perfect, hollowed form suspended in imagination. Translating that invisible cathedral onto a blank cliff face was the first and most critical act. With no interior to measure, they began by marking the exterior. Using simple ropes soaked in pigment, teams would snap bold guiding lines onto the rock, mapping out the grand silhouette of the facade and the precise location of the future doorway. This was the only true reference point they had. Once the doorway was opened, the artists would step into darkness, and the real test of mental modeling began. They could not work like traditional builders, constructing from the ground up. Instead, they had to think in reverse, carving from the top down and from the ceiling inward. Picture an artisan standing on a precarious scaffold in the gloom, a plumb bob hanging from his hand. He would first define the highest point of the chamber's ceiling. That hanging weight, a simple tool responding to gravity, became his true north. Every vertical measurement, every wall, every column's placement was referenced back to that single point. As they carved downward, removing the stone above and around the future space, they were essentially revealing the void they had already mapped in their collective mind. This required a spatial reasoning so advanced it borders on the supernatural. They had to constantly calculate not what they were adding, but what they were taking away, ensuring that the proportions of a pillar they would not touch for another 5 years remained perfectly aligned with the ceiling they were shaping today. One misjudged angle, one over-eager cut into what was supposed to become a load-bearing wall, and the entire spatial harmony would be lost with no way to add back the missing stone. This method transformed the construction site into a kind of 4-dimensional puzzle. They were not just working in height, width, and depth, but in the dimension of sequential revelation. The Ellora Kailasa Temple in India, a multi-story complex rivaling any built structure, is the ultimate testament to this cognitive feat. Its creators executed a plan of staggering complexity, with balconies, bridges, and sculpted galleries, all by starting at the top and moving down, their vision unwavering across generations. This was architecture as an act of profound faith, a belief in a finished masterpiece that would only be seen in its entirety on the very last day of work, when the final veil of uncut rock was removed. But carving a perfect space was only half the miracle. A chamber of pure darkness serves little purpose. The final, brilliant challenge was to steal light from the outside world and conduct it deep into the heart of the mountain, to make the stone itself seem to glow. The echoing silence of these finished chambers holds a truth we often overlook. For every breathtaking facade and every perfectly proportioned pillar, there stood not a single visionary but a vast living community. These monuments were not the work of a solitary hermit or a small band of devotees, though their spiritual vision provided the blueprint. They were the product of immense, organized human effort, a symphony of labor conducted over decades, sometimes centuries. To carve a mountain, you first need to mobilize a society. This was the unseen reality behind the wonder, a complex hierarchy of skill and sweat that transformed a cliff face into a legacy. At the base of this pyramid were the quarrymen, the muscle of the operation. These were the individuals who faced the raw, unyielding rock first, using the techniques of fire setting, leverage, and relentless percussion. Their task was the brutal, physical work of bulk removal. They worked in coordinated teams, likely following shouted commands or the rhythm of a drum, their world filled with the constant din of hammering and the dust-choked air. Theirs was a life defined by sheer endurance, carving out the initial, rough-hewn void that would become the canvas for others. Once that cavernous space was created, a second wave of artisans would move in. These were the sculptors and the carvers, the true artists of stone. With finer chisels and mallets, they translated architectural plans into reality, turning rough walls into smooth surfaces and blank rock into intricate columns, statues, and friezes. Their work required a different kind of knowledge, a mastery of geometry, proportion, and artistic tradition. They were often following precise iconographic rules, ensuring every carved deity or symbolic motif was correct down to the smallest detail. Then came the specialists, the polishers who used abrasives like sand and water to give walls a mirror-like sheen, or the engineers who designed hidden channels to divert groundwater and protect the chamber from seepage. This entire enterprise demanded a sophisticated support system. Think of the logistics involved: food, water, and tools for hundreds, perhaps thousands, of workers had to be brought to remote sites. Temporary settlements would spring up around the construction zone. There were overseers, foremen, and master architects who held the grand plan, coordinating these different teams so the work of the quarrymen below did not jeopardize the delicate carving happening elsewhere. The funding for such endeavors was colossal. Projects like the rock-cut tombs of ancient Lycia in Turkey or the astonishing Barabar caves in India, with their mirror-polished walls, were almost certainly state-sponsored. They required the treasury of a king or the collective wealth of a powerful merchant guild, representing not just piety but political power and economic stability. This perspective shifts our understanding profoundly. These sites are more than mystical artifacts, they are fossilized social structures. In their perfect geometry and enduring silence, we can hear the faint echoes of 1,000 different voices, the calloused hands of unnamed laborers, the focused gaze of master craftsmen, and the ambitious vision of patrons who believed their legacy was worth the labor of generations. It moves the story from a singular mystery to a shared human achievement, a testament to what communities can accomplish when united by a common, monumental goal. Yet this collective effort was always in service of a deeper purpose. Why go to such impossible lengths? What belief was so powerful it could justify this generational investment of blood, treasure, and hope? The answer lies not in the stone itself, but in the profound intent behind its shaping. The profound purpose behind this staggering labor often begins with a final, silent journey. For countless ancient peoples, the earth was not just a material, but a sacred threshold. To carve a chamber deep into a cliff was to create a permanent doorway, a liminal space suspended between the world of the living and the realms believed to lie beyond. This fundamental belief gave rise to one of the most widespread purposes for these structures, serving as eternal sanctuaries for both the divine and the departed. Consider the rose-red city of Petra. Its breathtaking facades glowing in the desert sun are not palaces for the living, they are homes for the dead. The Nabateans carved these elaborate tombs directly into the sandstone cliffs, believing the mountain itself would provide an indestructible vessel for the soul. The intricate columns, pediments, and statues were not merely decorative, they were a form of eternal honor, a permanent address for the deceased in the afterlife. By placing their loved ones within the living rock, they sought to protect them from decay and oblivion, merging individual memory with the timelessness of the landscape itself. The tomb facade became a frozen moment of reverence, ensuring the departed remained a visible, honored part of the community's world, forever sheltered within the earth's embrace. Yet the same impulse to create a permanent threshold also reached upward toward the heavens. If the rock could house human remains for eternity, could it not also provide a dwelling fit for a god? This idea finds its most spectacular expression in the Kailasa temple at Ellora. Here, the purpose was not to create a tomb, but to replicate a divine abode. The entire multi-story complex is a meticulous copy of Mount Kailash, the mythical Himalayan home of the god Shiva. The architects did not build a model of the sacred mountain, they revealed it from within a single, monolithic hill. Every carved balcony, sculpted elephant, and echoing gallery was intended to be a permanent, unshakable residence for the divine. Unlike a built temple that could burn or collapse, this rock-cut sanctuary was conceived as part of the earth's own body, as eternal as the deity it honored. It was a space where heaven and earth met in solid stone. This dual purpose as both sepulchre and sanctuary reveals a profound common thread across continents and cultures. It speaks to a universal human yearning to negotiate with eternity. The temporal world of wood, brick, and flesh was seen as fleeting, but the bedrock beneath our feet promised permanence. By investing generations of labor to hollow out spaces within that bedrock, communities were attempting to forge a direct, unbreakable link. They placed what they cherished most, the bodies of their ancestors and the images of their gods, into the only material they believed could truly withstand time. The rock-cut chamber became the ultimate vessel for memory and faith, a bridge crafted from the very bones of the planet, meant to connect the fragile now with the infinite forever. But not all chambers were meant for gods or the departed. Some served a far more immediate and practical purpose for the living, hidden in plain sight. But the same stone that cradled eternal spirits could also offer immediate, desperate sanctuary. While some chambers were carved for the afterlife, others were shaped by the urgent pressures of this one, transforming the mountain into a fortress. This was architecture born not from contemplation, but from conflict, a pragmatic answer to the fundamental need for survival. In the surreal, wind-sculpted landscape of Cappadocia in Turkey, entire cities were carved not upward but downward into the soft volcanic rock. These were not mere clusters of caves, they were meticulously planned subterranean refuges like the vast complex at Derinkuyu. Imagine a community facing the threat of invasion. At a signal, they would vanish, descending through a series of narrow, easily defensible tunnels that could be sealed with massive, wheel-shaped stone doors. Within the earth, they found a self-contained world, multiple levels stretched deep underground containing living quarters, stables for livestock, churches, wineries, and vast storage chambers for food and water. Ingenious ventilation shafts, sometimes stretching over 100 feet to the surface, provided fresh air, while cleverly hidden wells tapped into underground water sources. These were habitats designed for a siege that could last for months, places where life could continue, protected by a blanket of solid rock. Across the world, in the sun-baked mesas of the American Southwest, a similar story of defensive ingenuity unfolded. The ancestral Pueblones at places like Mesa Verde constructed their dwellings not on the cliffs but within them. They built entire villages in soaring, south-facing alcoves high above the canyon floor. The approach to these cliff dwellings was often a single, difficult path, easily watched and defended. The overhanging rock provided a natural roof, shielding them from summer sun and winter snow, while the elevated position offered a commanding view of any approaching threat. Like their counterparts in Cappadocia, these communities engineered remarkable systems for survival within the stone, constructing reservoirs to capture precious rainwater and designing storage rooms to preserve harvests. This purpose reveals a different facet of the rock-cut mind. Here, the mountain was not a gateway to eternity, but a shield against the present. The subtractive process was driven by a stark calculus of security. It was about creating spaces that were invisible, inaccessible, or impregnable. The labor invested was not for spiritual transcendence, but for communal preservation. This pragmatic ingenuity, woven directly into the living rock, speaks to a universal human instinct. When the world above grew dangerous, these cultures looked not to the horizon, but to the earth beneath their feet, and with patient, determined hands, they carved out a future. Yet, the human relationship with these hollowed spaces held one more profound dimension, one that moved beyond defense or devotion into a realm of pure, transformative experience. A hollowed mountain could also serve as the ultimate throne. Beyond sanctuaries and shelters, the most ambitious rock-cut projects were driven by a force as old as civilization itself, the need for a ruler to declare their power in a language that even time could not erase. This is where architecture transforms into political theater, where the cliff face becomes a monumental canvas for a message meant to echo across centuries. The scale and permanence of these creations made them the perfect medium for royal legacy, a statement carved literally into the bones of the landscape for all time. Consider the overwhelming presence of the great pharaoh Ramses II at Abu Simbel in Egypt. His colossal statues, each standing over 60 feet tall, were not placed before a temple, they are the temple. Gazing eternally across the Nile, these figures were designed with a clear dual purpose: to inspire awe in his subjects and project sheer, unassailable intimidation to any potential enemy approaching from the south. The entire complex was a declaration in stone, proclaiming the pharaoh's divine right and his eternal watch over the kingdom. It communicated that his authority was as fundamental and unmovable as the rock from which his image was hewn. This idea of merging royal identity with the enduring earth finds another profound expression far to the east in ancient Persia. High on a sheer cliff at Naqsh-e-Rustam, the tomb of King Darius I is carved in the shape of a cross, its facade mimicking the grand entrance to a royal palace. It sits not as a lonely monument, but as the centerpiece in a necropolis of kings overlooking the plain below. The strategic placement is masterful. By placing his final resting place high in the mountainside, Darius was symbolically associating himself with the enduring, protective strength of the cliffs themselves. He was not buried in the earth, he was enthroned within it, forever looking down upon the realm he once commanded. Commissioning such an impossible-seeming project was itself a potent demonstration of power. It showed a ruler's absolute control over vast resources, advanced engineering knowledge, and the labor of countless thousands. A leader who could command a mountain to become his statue or his tomb was displaying a sovereignty that felt supernatural. These structures were often less about intricate interior function and more about overwhelming exterior spectacle. They served as eternal billboards of sovereignty, meant to be seen and understood from a distance by travelers, traders, and rival armies. The message was simple and unchanging. My glory is not built from bricks that may crumble. It is revealed from the stone that forms the world. In this light, the rock-cut chamber becomes the most durable form of propaganda ever devised. A king's name and face fused with the very geology of his domain, ensuring that long after his dynasty fell, his claim to greatness would still stand silent and immovable against the horizon. Yet, for all their grandeur as tombs or proclamations of power, some of the most fascinating rock-cut spaces were designed for a completely different kind of human experience, one that turned inward to explore the landscapes of the mind itself. Yet within the perfect silence of the stone, a hidden dimension was waiting to be heard. The most profound purpose of these chambers was not always something to be seen, but something to be felt, vibrating through the very air. Beyond their visual majesty, many of these spaces were engineered with an invisible precision, tuned not just for the eye but for the ear. This was architectural purpose as acoustic instrument, where the rock itself became a resonator, shaping sound into a tool for transcendence. Recent research has peeled back a layer of silence, revealing that the creators of these chambers understood sound as a physical, malleable force. They carved to control it. In the subterranean labyrinth known as the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni on Malta, there is a room modern researchers call the Oracle Chamber. Speak within it, and your voice is transformed. The small, oval space resonates powerfully at a specific, low frequency, a hum that seems to come from the walls themselves. This sonic effect is not an accident of geology. It is a product of the chamber's exact dimensions and shape. Studies suggest that certain sound frequencies, particularly those this chamber amplifies, can influence human brainwave patterns. The ancient ritualists who used this space may have employed chants or drums to fill the room with this resonant frequency, using the architecture to induce altered states of consciousness, to blur the line between the physical world and the spiritual one. Here, sound was the doorway. This principle of designed acoustics appears across the ancient world. Consider the so-called treasury of Atreus, a magnificent beehive-shaped tomb in Mycenae. Its soaring, corbelled dome creates an acoustic phenomenon known as a prolonged reverberation. A single spoken word or a note of music hangs in the air for an astonishing length of time, blending and layering upon itself. For someone standing in that space during a ritual, the effect would have been overwhelming. The chants of priests or the music of instruments would not merely be heard, they would become an enveloping, almost tangible presence, swelling to fill the entire dome with what would have felt like a supernatural chorus. This transforms our understanding of these sites from static monuments into dynamic sensory theaters. The experience was meticulously crafted to be multisensory. The flickering torchlight on carved walls, the smell of incense and stone, and above all, the sound, all worked in concert. The architecture was a vessel for vibration, designed to amplify specific tones, to create echoes that felt like voices from another realm, or to produce a resonant hum that could physically affect those within. This intentional sonic design suggests that connecting with the divine was not a purely intellectual or visual act. It was a full-body experience where the environment itself participated in the ritual, using physics to alter perception. To stand in such a space and listen is to engage with the past in a fundamentally different way. It invites us to close our eyes and hear the echoes of ceremonies long ended, to understand that for the people who created these chambers, the mountain did not just house their rituals, it sang along with them. This revelation of acoustic purpose adds a profound layer to the mystery, showing us that the true genius of these builders was often felt, not seen, a resonance carved into eternity. The stone chamber's final secret was written not on its walls, but in the path of a single beam of light. For some of these ancient builders, the ultimate purpose was to capture time itself, transforming a hollowed space into a sophisticated instrument for reading the heavens. This is where architecture and astronomy merged, where a doorway or a narrow shaft became a precision sightline to the cosmos. The most celebrated example is Newgrange in Ireland, a massive 5,000-year-old passage tomb. For most of the year, its inner chamber rests in deep, silent darkness, but for a few precious minutes around the winter solstice just after dawn, something miraculous happens. As the sun crests the distant horizon, a slender shaft of golden light pierces through a specially constructed opening above the entrance, known as a roof box. This beam travels down the long, narrow passageway, creeping slowly across the floor until it floods the central chamber with a radiant glow, marking the precise moment of the sun's rebirth. This was no happy accident. It required generations of precise observation and flawless engineering to align the entire structure so perfectly. The event transformed the tomb from a resting place into a cosmic clock, a guarantee that even in the depth of winter, the cycle of life would begin anew. This celestial purpose appears in quieter forms across the world. A chamber's entrance might be oriented to catch the first light of the equinox, dividing the year into equal halves of light and dark. A narrow window might frame the rising of a specific star, heralding the time to plant or to harvest. In the ancient city of Petra, certain tombs are aligned with the setting sun on significant dates, bathing the carved facades in a symbolic, fiery light. These alignments did more than mark the seasons. They wove human time into the fabric of the universe. By embedding celestial rhythms into the stillness of rock, the builders created a permanent covenant between their community and the cosmos. The chamber became a fixed point of observation, a way to predict, to plan, and to participate in the grand, orderly dance of the heavens. It offered a profound sense of place within the vastness of time, assuring those who used it that their rituals, their agriculture, their very lives were in harmony with the eternal motions of the sun, moon, and stars. This purpose reveals a layer of intention that moves beyond the spiritual or the political into the deeply practical and philosophical. It shows a culture that saw itself not as separate from nature, but as an active participant within a living, breathing, and intelligible universe. The rock-cut chamber, in this light, becomes the ultimate anchor, a place where the turning of the sky could be witnessed and celebrated year after year, century after century, its silent stones holding a conversation with the light. A plain, cavernous hall speaks a different language than a labyrinth of tiny, interconnected rooms. The floor plan of a rock-cut space is its most honest blueprint, revealing not just how people moved but what they believed. When archaeologists map these interiors, they are often confronted with a puzzle. Why would a culture invest generations to hollow out a single, vast, and undivided echo chamber, while another, in seemingly the same type of stone, would carve a warren of precise, specialized cells? The answer lies in a simple but profound shift in perspective. For these builders, practical function and spiritual purpose were not separate categories. They were the same thing. The interior design was a direct physical manifestation of a belief system. Take the monastic complexes carved into the soft rock of Cappadocia. Here, the layout followed the rhythm of daily communal life. You would find a refectory for shared meals carved right next to a chapel for prayer, with dormitory cells, storage rooms, and even wineries all connected through a network of tunnels and stairs. This was a functional habitat, a subterranean village where every room served a clear, earthly need for a community living in isolation. The architecture facilitated the routines of devotion, work, and sustenance, all protected within the mountain's embrace. Now contrast that with the experience of a solitary tomb, like the so-called treasury of Atreus. Its interior is one overwhelming beehive-shaped void. There are no subdivisions, no separate chambers. The entire purpose is to create a singular, reverberant space meant to house remains and perhaps the soul in solemn, echoing solitude. The function here is not daily living but eternal rest, and the architecture amplifies that feeling of hushed, final separation from the world of the living. This principle becomes even more explicit in spaces designed for ritual movement. In many rock-cut temples in India, the layout forces a very specific journey upon the visitor. You might enter a hall, then be funneled through a narrow, columned passage that slowly circles around the central, most sacred shrine, a path known as circumambulation. You cannot go directly to the heart of the temple. You must move in a prescribed circular pattern. In this case, the function of the interior is to choreograph a physical act of reverence. The winding path is not an inefficient floor plan, it is the entire point. The architecture guides the body through a ritual, making belief something you do with your feet, not just think with your mind. So when we ask whether the form followed function or theology, we are asking the wrong question. For the people who carved these spaces, theology was the function. A plain chamber was not a lack of design, it was a design for awe or for finality. A complex maze of rooms was not mere practicality, it was a model of a communal, ordered universe carved directly into the rock. The floor plan is the clearest scripture they left behind, a map in stone that shows us how they moved through their world and how they hoped to move through the realms of spirit. The doorway stands as the most charged moment in any carved space. More than a simple hole in the rock, it was a boundary line between realities, a ceremonial gateway that transformed the act of walking from a mundane movement into a profound, symbolic passage. This is the deep symbolism of the threshold, where architecture becomes philosophy in stone. To cross this line was to leave behind the known world of sun, wind, and daily life, and to enter a realm governed by different rules, whether of the divine, the dead, or the deeply secret. The builders understood this psychological journey, and they framed it with deliberate, often breathtaking artistry. Look at the rock-cut tombs of ancient Lycia along the coast of modern Turkey. Their facades are carved to look exactly like the wooden houses of the living, complete with detailed beams, pitched roofs, and even mock door frames. This was not mere imitation, it was a profound statement. It presented the tomb not as a dark pit, but as a familiar home, easing the symbolic transition for the departed and offering a comforting, recognizable threshold for the living who came to pay their respects. The doorway promised continuity, suggesting the afterlife was simply another room in a house made eternal by stone. In India, this concept of the sacred portal finds perhaps its most elegant expression in the Torana. These are the magnificent, freestanding ceremonial arches that often mark the entrance to a chaitya, or prayer hall, carved into a cliff, intricately sculpted with divine figures, symbolic creatures, and lush floral motifs. The Torana is a masterpiece of stone that appears to float before the cave's mouth. Scholars believe these stone arches are direct copies in permanent material of the temporary wooden or fabric gateways that would have been erected for festive processions in ancient cities. By freezing this celebratory, temporary architecture into the enduring rock, the builders made a powerful declaration. They were saying that the act of entering this holy space was itself a perpetual festival, a continuous ceremony. Every time a devotee passed beneath the Torana, they were reenacting a sacred procession, crossing from the temporal world into a timeless one. The threshold was thus not a barrier, but an invitation to participate in an eternal ritual. This focus on the portal reveals a masterful understanding of human psychology. The architects were designing an experience, not just a room. The sequence mattered immensely. First, the awe-inspiring facade or arch captures your attention and prepares your mind. Then the doorway itself, often deliberately narrowed or darkened, forces a physical change, a slowing down, a moment of focus. You must consciously step across, and finally, you emerge into the inner space, which is often designed to contrast dramatically with the outside, whether through cool silence, resonant sound, or surprising grandeur. This carefully choreographed journey used the very body of the visitor to teach a lesson about transition and reverence. The threshold was the hinge on which that entire experience turned. It whispers to us that for these ancient cultures, space was never neutral. Every element, from the grandest column to the very act of crossing a line, was imbued with intention, a silent guide steering the human spirit toward wonder, memory, or peace. Darkness was their canvas and light became their chisel. For the architects of these rock-cut worlds, illumination was never a simple utility. It was a dynamic, living material to be shaped and directed with the same intentionality as the stone. They faced a unique constraint. Unlike builders of freestanding structures, they could not simply punch windows into a wall wherever they wished. Every opening, every shaft, was a permanent subtraction that weakened the mountain's fabric. This limitation forced a genius of indirect lighting, a mastery of reflected and channeled brilliance that transformed static chambers into theaters of moving shadow and sacred glow. Their tools were elegantly simple, yet their effects were profound. They carved shallow, sloping shelves into walls near high openings. These light shelves caught the sun's direct beams and bounced them downward, washing interior walls with a soft, diffused radiance that eliminated harsh shadows. In some chambers, they excavated shallow pools or basins directly into the floor and filled them with water. These became reflective surfaces, capturing light from a doorway or shaft and casting a shimmering, dancing pattern of reflections onto the ceiling, creating an ethereal, ever-changing canopy above. The most sophisticated technique involved the strategic placement of openings themselves. A single, carefully angled aperture could act like a spotlight. For hours, a beam of sunlight might travel silently across a dark floor, and then, at a precise moment, land directly upon a statue's serene face or a sacred symbol carved into the far wall. The Ajanta caves in India offer a breathtaking lesson in this celestial choreography. Within these dim, serene halls, carved over centuries, certain Buddha statues sit in perpetual shadow for most of the day. But as the sun arcs across the sky, its light finds a specific, narrow opening. For a brief, glorious window of time, a single, sharp beam pierces the interior gloom to illuminate just one divine figure, as if the heavens themselves were bestowing a moment of grace upon it. This was not coincidence, it was celestial engineering. It created a moment of awe for the devotee, a tangible experience of the divine made manifest through light and timing. This interplay of stark shadow and luminous revelation was a core narrative device. Deep darkness was used to conceal, to create a sense of mystery and anticipation as one moved through a passage. Then, a strategically placed opening would suddenly reveal a towering sculpture or a wall of intricate carvings, bathing it in a dramatic, almost theatrical spotlight. This visual journey guided the visitor's focus and emotion, leading them from uncertainty to wonder. The contrast itself held meaning, symbolizing the transition from ignorance to enlightenment, from the mundane world into a realm of sacred knowledge. In this way, light was an active participant in the ritual. It marked the sacred hours, it animated the statues, and it painted stories on blank stone. The architects understood that to shape space was to shape experience, and they wielded sunlight and shadow with the precision of artists. They proved that the most powerful illumination often comes not from flooding a room with light, but from knowing exactly where and when to place a single, perfect beam. The silent stone held another secret, a hidden network of veins and arteries that gave these spaces life. Beyond the grand facades and echoing chambers, ancient engineers faced a relentless, elemental challenge: water. In the depths of a mountain, water was both a destructive threat and a precious gift. The true genius of these sites is revealed not in their grandest halls, but in their ingenious, often invisible hydraulic systems. Builders had to become masters of a delicate balance, solving two opposite problems at once. They had to become expert excluders, designing ways to keep groundwater and floodwater from seeping in and eroding their work from within. At the very same time, they had to become expert collectors, capturing every possible drop of rainwater from the surface to sustain the communities within. This dual-purpose engineering transformed the rock into a living, breathing organism. Across the ancient world, from the wind-carved landscapes of Cappadocia to the rose-red cliffs of Petra, we find the same clever solutions carved directly into the stone. Delicate channels no wider than a hand were meticulously cut along ceilings and down walls. These weren't for decoration. They were capillary networks designed to catch the slightest seepage from the living rock above and gently guide it away from precious carvings and living spaces, funneling it into deeper drainage sumps. On the surface, the architecture itself became a catchment system. Broad, sloping facades and cleverly designed courtyards were sculpted to channel torrential rain away from doorways, while also directing the flow into carved gutters and downspouts that fed hidden cisterns below. In Cappadocia's vast underground cities, these cisterns were colossal, sealed chambers that could hold enough water to sustain thousands of people through months of siege. The rock itself, once a potential source of damp and decay, was engineered to become the tank, but water's role was not always purely practical. In many spaces, it was central to the spiritual purpose. Within early Christian rock-cut churches, archaeologists often find beautifully carved baptismal fonts, permanent basins hewn from the floor where the ritual of rebirth was performed. In other traditions, a sacred pool might occupy the heart of a chamber, its still surface reflecting carved deities on the walls, doubling their presence and symbolizing purity, life, and the primordial waters of creation. This integration of water management tells a profound story. It moves our understanding beyond seeing these sites as symbolic monuments or temporary refuges. It proves they were designed as fully functional, self-sufficient environments. The presence of sophisticated, permanent hydraulic systems indicates planning for long-term, sustained human activity, whether that was daily monastic life, year-round habitation, or the regular cycle of rituals that required fresh, flowing water. This practical engineering underscores a deeper truth. These builders were not just dreamers or artists. They were holistic designers. They understood that to create a space for the human spirit, they first had to create a space where the human body could survive and thrive. They listened to the mountain's whispers, to the sound of hidden water, and with patient strokes, they taught the stone how to drink, how to shed, and how to sustain life in its deepest, darkest heart. Scattered across the world, silent and half-born, lie chambers that were never finished. These abandoned spaces are not failures, but frozen moments, the most honest windows we have into the ancient mind at work. They are blueprints in 3 dimensions, capturing the creative process in mid-stride. In Egypt's Valley of the Kings, a tomb known simply as the Unfinished Tomb presents a stark classroom. Here, you can walk through the sequence exactly as the artisans did. The entrance tunnel, rough-hewn and uneven, gives way to a larger room where the walls have been only partially smooth. Chisel marks cover every surface like frantic handwriting, showing the direction of strikes, the force applied. In one corner, the wall is polished to a mirror finish, a demonstration of the intended final product, while beside it, the stone remains a jagged, raw wound. You can see where the outline of a doorway was sketched in red ochre paint upon the rock, a guide for cuts that were never made. These lines are decisions frozen in time, the ghost of an architect's intention hovering just over the stone. Similarly, among the magnificent completed caves at Ellora in India, a few remain in a state of arrested development. In these spaces, the grand vision is unmistakable, yet the journey is laid bare. Massive pillars have been blocked out in rough, cubic forms, awaiting the artisan who would carve them into flowing, floral columns. On a ceiling, the grid for an intricate mural is still visible, a mathematical guide for divine figures that were never given faces. These sites are archaeological treasures precisely because they were not perfected. They show us the workflow, the scaffolding of genius. The initial phase was always the brutal removal, hacking out a cavernous void. Next came the shaping, turning rough walls into flat planes and defined angles. Only then, as the final and most delicate act, would the sculptors and painters move in to add the layer of sacred story and symbolism. An unfinished chamber captures a pause between these stages, letting us hear the echo of the last hammer strike. Why did the work stop? The reasons are as human as the ambition that started it. Sometimes the mountain itself refused the partnership. A master sculptor, deep in the process, might have uncovered a hidden fissure or a vein of crumbling, unstable stone that made the entire chamber unsafe. To continue would risk collapse, wasting generations of labor. The only choice was to seal the doorway and walk away, a testament to nature's veto. Other halts came from the world of men. A patron king might fall from power, his treasury emptied, his grand project suddenly without funding. A shift in religious practice could make a particular design obsolete before the first column was polished. Or broader historical upheaval, a war or a famine, could simply redirect a society's energy and resources toward immediate survival, leaving the dream in the stone to wait for a future that never came. These abandoned sites remind us that the sublime monuments we admire today were never inevitable. They were victories snatched from a universe of potential failure, subject to all the frailties of politics, economics, and sheer luck. This perspective is profoundly humbling. A finished temple or tomb presents itself as a complete, timeless statement. It asks for our awe, and we readily give it. But an unfinished chamber asks for our empathy. It shows the sweat before the splendor, the doubt before the certainty. We see the trial lines, the corrected mistakes, the sheer volume of material that had to be hauled away, bucket by bucket, before any beauty could be revealed. These spaces demystify the past, not by diminishing the accomplishment, but by humanizing it. They transform anonymous, ancient builders into teams of individuals who left for the day, expecting to return tomorrow, their tools leaning against a wall they never finished smoothing. In their interrupted labor, we find a powerful connection. Their ambition was cut short, but in that very interruption, they gave us a greater gift, a clear view into the workshop of history, where every masterpiece was once just an idea and a pile of rubble waiting in the dark. The same architectural idea can appear in two places separated by 1,000 miles of desert and sea. This is not a case of parallel invention, but of a blueprint passed from hand to hand. The grand, columned facades of Petra, for instance, bear a striking, undeniable resemblance to the architectural styles flourishing in Hellenistic cities like Alexandria across the Mediterranean. This similarity is a clue, a fingerprint left by the most powerful vehicle for innovation the ancient world possessed, the long-distance trade route. These were not just paths for silk and spice, they were highways for ideas. Stonemasons, master architects, and skilled artists were themselves trade goods, traveling with caravans and sailing with merchant ships. They carried their knowledge not in scrolls alone, but in their hands and in their minds, in remembered ratios and sketchbooks filled with designs. A patron in a distant land, impressed by a story or a drawing of a magnificent rock-cut tomb, could hire these traveling experts to replicate that wonder in a local cliff face, adapting the form to new gods and new stone. The most profound example of this cultural cross-pollination is written in the caves of the Silk Road. The tradition of carving Buddhist monastic complexes directly into rock began in India, at places like the magnificent Ajanta. As Buddhist teachings traveled north and east along the trade networks, the architectural blueprint traveled with them. Monks, pilgrims, and artisans carried the concept of the prayer hall, the monastic cell, and the sacred statue revealed from the living rock. This knowledge found new expression in the breathtaking Mogao caves of China, where 1,000 years of artistry created a symphony of Buddhist art within the sandstone cliffs. The layout, the spiritual function, and even many artistic motifs show a clear lineage, a conversation in stone that spanned continents. This perspective fundamentally changes how we see these enigmatic chambers. They are not isolated mysteries, each born in a vacuum. Instead, they are powerful nodes in a vast, ancient network of shared human ingenuity. A design perfected in the limestone of one region could inspire a revolution in the sandstone of another. It reveals a world far more connected than we often assume, where cultural exchange was not an abstract concept, but a physical process, quite literally set in stone for us to discover centuries later. The stone itself remembers the touch of the hand that shaped it. While grand facades speak of power and purpose, the true intimacy of these spaces is etched on a far smaller scale, in the countless microscopic scars left by ancient tools. To the untrained eye, a chamber wall might look simply smooth or rough, but to an archaeologist with a trained eye and a careful light, that surface becomes a detailed historical document, a permanent record of technique, rhythm, and human effort. This is the enduring mystery of tool marks and craftsmanship, a forensic study that listens to the heartbeat of the construction process itself. Every culture, every era, left a distinct signature in the stone. Consider the methodical precision of Roman engineers. In their rock-cut aqueducts and tombs, you can often find long, perfectly parallel grooves from a flat chisel, struck with a consistent mechanical rhythm. These marks speak of highly organized, almost militaristic labor, where teams worked in disciplined unison to achieve a uniform finish. Now, shift your gaze to a much older site, like a Bronze Age tomb in the Mediterranean. Here, the surface might be covered in a pattern of small, circular indentations, a texture known as pecking. This was achieved by repeatedly striking the rock with a harder stone tool, a slower, more percussive technique that required immense patience and created a uniquely pitted, organic texture. The contrast in these marks tells a story of technological evolution and cultural preference. But perhaps the most breathtaking signature belongs to the master artisans of ancient India, particularly in sites like the Barabar caves. Here, the walls and ceilings were brought to a finish so flawless, so mirror-smooth, that they seemed to be made of polished glass or liquid stone. This was not achieved by chisels alone. After the initial carving, these craftsmen employed a relentless process of grinding and polishing with progressively finer abrasives, likely using wet sand and cloth over countless hours. The result is a surface that captures and plays with light in a magical way, demonstrating an aesthetic standard that valued perfection and luminous reflection above all else. Studying these microscopic signatures does more than catalog tools. It reveals the invisible human layers of the project. The density and direction of strikes can indicate the skill level of individual workers, perhaps showing where a master took over from an apprentice. The organization of marks can suggest how labor was divided, where one team roughed out a section and another moved in to refine it. Most powerfully, these permanent impressions connect us directly to the anonymous individuals whose names are lost to time. In the repetitive groove of a chisel, we can almost hear the steady, day-long rhythm of their labor. In the concentrated cluster of pecking marks on a difficult corner, we sense their focus and problem-solving. In the sublime smoothness of a polished wall, we feel their relentless pursuit of an ideal. This forensic approach transforms the chamber from a static monument into a living workshop. The stone becomes a collaborative canvas, holding the collective memory of every strike, every decision, every pair of hands that contributed to revealing the space from the dark. It reminds us that these wonders were not created by abstract forces or gods, but by generations of real people whose breath once fogged the cool air, whose muscles ached at the end of the day, and whose enduring legacy is not a name on a plaque, but the silent, eloquent texture of the rock they loved into form. The mirror-smooth walls of certain chambers whisper a tantalizing question. Could the ancient builders have possessed a secret, a lost technology that allowed them to work stone as if it were soft clay? This idea often springs from the sheer, breathtaking perfection we see in places like the seamless joins of Inca masonry or the liquid smooth polish of ancient Egyptian granite boxes. Some fringe theories propose that these cultures might have used a chemical agent, a plant-based solution or a natural acid, to temporarily soften the rock, making it malleable for shaping before it hardened again. It is a compelling image, the idea of a forgotten alchemy that turned mountains into manageable putty. Yet, mainstream archaeology finds little to no physical evidence for such methods. No recipes survive in ancient texts, no chemical residues have been consistently identified on the stone surfaces themselves. The persistence of this speculation, however, tells us less about the ancients and more about ourselves. We live in an age of instant solutions and rapid fabrication. When we confront work of such flawless scale and patience, our modern minds can sometimes leap to the idea of a technological shortcut because the alternative is almost more difficult to comprehend. That alternative is the true marvel, the profound depth of traditional skill honed over generations. What we label as mysterious or impossible is often just a testament to a different relationship with time and material. A master sculptor with a simple bronze chisel and a bag of sand abrasive, working 12 hours a day for a year, can achieve a surface so flat and smooth it defies belief. A team of such artisans, working in coordinated shifts across a century, can hollow out a mountain. The real lost technology is not a magical stone softening liquid, but the cultural capacity for such monumental, generational focus. The organizational power to feed, house, and motivate thousands of workers toward a single goal that none of them would live to see completed. This is the true advanced technique that feels alien to our world. This debate is itself a crucial part of the chamber's enduring enigma. It forces us to confront our own assumptions about history and human capability. Were our ancestors primitive, or were they simply different, possessing a mastery of their environment and a patience we have largely forgotten? The stone does not lie. The even, consistent tool marks, the logical sequencing of construction phases, the evidence of trial and error in unfinished sites, all point toward an answer of immense, refined skill rather than vanished secrets. The chambers challenge us to expand our understanding of what is possible with simple tools, profound knowledge, and the one resource we often undervalue, the relentless, enduring will to create something for the ages. The rock's color told a story before the first chisel ever touched it. For the ancient architects, geology was never a neutral palette. It was a living scripture, its hues and textures woven directly into their sacred myths. The choice of stone was a deliberate act of alignment, ensuring the very material of the structure resonated with its spiritual purpose. In Egypt, this symbolic language was etched into the landscape itself. The brilliant white limestone quarried from Tura was not chosen merely for its workability. It was sacredly associated with the primordial mound, the first land to rise from the waters of chaos at the moment of creation. This made it the only fitting material for solar temples dedicated to the sun god Ra. structures designed to echo and participate in that initial act of cosmic order. Conversely, the reddish sandstone from the quarries at Jebel el-Silsila held a different, darker meaning. Its color linked it to the red land, the desert, which symbolized the realm of chaos and the underworld. This made it the intentional, spiritually correct choice for tombs and mortuary temples, gateways for the pharaoh's journey into that very realm. The stone itself prepared the soul for its destination. This profound symbolism extended far beyond the Nile. At the Ellora cave complex in India, the rock itself was part of the devotion. The entire site is carved from the rugged, volcanic basalt of the Deccan Plateau. To the artisans, this was not inert matter. The stone's inherent strength and durability were seen as reflections of spiritual potency, its very density a metaphor for the enduring truth of the teachings enshrined within. The act of carving such resilient rock became an act of spiritual perseverance, revealing divine forms from a material believed to be charged with earthly energy. Even the smallest details held meaning. A stone containing visible fossils might be interpreted as a record of ancient life, connecting the chamber to deep ancestral time. A particularly sparkling vein of crystal could be seen as a captured fragment of celestial light. The builders were reading the Earth's biography and selecting the chapter that best matched the story they wished to tell. This transforms our understanding of their process from engineering into a form of deep communion. They were not just using rock, they were conversing with it, engaging with a material they believed was imbued with its own presence and memory. The site selection was the first prayer, and every subsequent strike was a dialogue, aligning human ambition with the perceived essence of the earth itself. The mountain was not a canvas, but a collaborator in a sacred narrative written in mineral and faith. A chamber's purpose was never truly sealed with its final stone. These enduring spaces, carved to last for eternity, inevitably outlived the cultures that created them, and in their permanence they invited new stories. Across centuries, a single hollowed room could witness a complete transformation of meaning, becoming a living archive of human adaptation. The silent tomb of one era might be carefully cleared to become the secluded cell of a medieval hermit seeking solitude within its ancient walls. A grand pagan temple with its processional route and altars could be reconsecrated with new symbols, its echoing nave now hosting the prayers of a different faith as a church or a mosque. Even a defensive refuge carved during a time of war might find peaceful reuse centuries later as a cool, dry storage depot for grain or wine. This process of adaptation and reuse layers history directly onto the stone, creating a rich, complex palimpsest that challenges simple interpretation but deepens our connection to the human journey. The caves of Matera in southern Italy offer one of the most powerful chronicles of this continuous reuse. Carved into a steep ravine, these chambers began as simple prehistoric dwellings. Later, Byzantine monks sought out these same caves, expanding them into secluded monasteries and painting their walls with vibrant frescoes of saints. As centuries passed, the spaces evolved again, becoming the crowded homes and workshops of a growing medieval city, nestled within the rock. By the 20th century, many had deteriorated into impoverished slums, a stark chapter in their long history before preservation efforts began. In Matera, you can literally see the strata of human life, one civilization building upon the literal footprint of the last, all within the same immutable stone shell. This is not a story of erasure, but of endurance and resourcefulness. For archaeologists, such sites are fascinating puzzles, a layer of Christian crosses painted over older geometric patterns, or a Muslim prayer niche carved into a wall that once held a statue of a Hindu deity, forces a re-evaluation of the space's entire biography. The original intent becomes just the first sentence in a much longer story. This complicates the search for a single, pure moment of creation, but it rewards us with a far richer narrative. It shows that these chambers were never dead monuments, but continuously relevant spaces. Their very permanence made them valuable real estate across the millennia. Each new culture looked at the enduring shelter and asked, how can this serve us now? They saw not a relic frozen in time, but a practical, powerful space waiting to be filled with new meaning. This adaptive reuse reveals a profound truth about human interaction with the past. We rarely encounter history in a vacuum. We live with it, repurpose it, and weave our own stories into its fabric. A rock-cut chamber, by its very nature, encourages this dialogue. It is too solid to ignore, too useful to abandon. Its story becomes one of resilience and transformation, a testament not to one culture's genius, but to the ongoing, creative spirit of humanity itself. These spaces teach us that history is not a series of isolated events, but a continuous, overlapping conversation, where every generation leaves its own inscription on the walls left behind by those who came before. The air within these chambers feels different on your skin, a constant coolness that never knows the sun. This sensory shift is the first step in a carefully orchestrated psychological journey, one the ancient architects understood on a visceral level. Stepping from the bright, noisy, changing world into the deep, silent, and eternal embrace of the rock does something to the human mind. It is an environmental reset. The relentless heat or cold outside is replaced by a steady, cave-like temperature that seems to slow time itself. The cacophony of wind, animals, and human activity is swallowed by a profound quiet, broken only by the sound of your own breath and the distant drip of water. This sensory deprivation is not an accident of being underground, it is a feature. By stripping away the constant stimuli of the surface world, the architecture forces you inward. Your attention, with nowhere else to go, turns to the space itself and to your own thoughts. This naturally cultivated a state of introspection, making these chambers perfect vessels for prayer, meditation, or communion with the divine. The mind, uncluttered by external distraction, could focus entirely on the spiritual message carved into the walls or the ritual being performed. Then there is the sheer, palpable weight of the mountain overhead. You are not just in a room, you are beneath countless tons of living rock. This creates a powerful, subconscious feeling of containment and security, a return to the womb of the earth. For communities using these spaces as refuges, this feeling translated into tangible safety. For a devotee in a temple, it might evoke a sense of being held within a protective, sacred embrace, separated from the profane world outside. This psychological anchor of mass and permanence stands in direct opposition to the fragile, temporary nature of human life, making the space feel all the more eternal and awe-inspiring. The builders amplified this awe through the deliberate manipulation of scale. Entering a colossal hall like the hypostyle hall in a rock-cut temple, where gigantic pillars soar into shadow, deliberately shrinks the individual. This experience of humility in the face of monumental craftsmanship was a direct pathway to the numinous, that overwhelming feeling of the sacred. It prepared the visitor to accept a message of divine power or royal authority far greater than themselves. Perhaps the most masterful psychological tool was their control of sound and echo. In the utter silence, any noise becomes an event. A whispered prayer rolls through a cavern and returns as a chorus of ghosts. A single footstep can resonate like a drumbeat. This acoustic environment made ritual profoundly participatory. Your own voice became part of the architecture, transformed and amplified by the stone. This blurring of the boundary between the self and the space could induce trance-like states, making the spiritual feel immediate and physically real. For a ruler, this same acoustic principle served a different master. Imagine an audience chamber carved deep into a cliff where a king held court. His voice, projected from a dais, would be carried and deepened by the natural reverberation of the room, making it sound more powerful, more resonant, more godlike. The very stone would become a tool to magnify his authority, using physics to command psychological submission. This deep understanding of environmental psychology reveals the builders as masters of human experience. They did not just carve rooms, they crafted states of being. They knew that to shape belief, you must first shape the sensory world in which that belief is held. The cool air, the heavy silence, the echoing dark, these were not mere conditions. They were the first and most powerful priests in the temple, quietly guiding every heart and mind toward reverence, wonder, or obedience. The true purpose of the chamber was completed not when the last chisel mark was made, but in the quiet transformation of every person who stepped across its threshold. This leads us to a final, haunting layer of the mystery, one that exists not in the stone, but in the stories we tell about it long after the builders are gone. The silent chambers have kept their secrets for millennia, but now they are beginning to speak. Modern archaeology is no longer limited to the trowel and brush. It now listens to the stone with technologies that feel like science fiction, revealing hidden truths without ever disturbing a grain of sand. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses of energy deep into the earth, painting a picture of voids and structures hidden behind solid walls. Three-dimensional laser scanning, known as LiDAR, captures every minute contour of a facade or chamber with millimeter precision, creating a perfect digital twin that can be studied from every angle. And drone photography provides breathtaking aerial views, uncovering large-scale patterns and alignments with the landscape that are impossible to see from the ground. These tools are revolutionizing the story, transforming ancient mystery into measurable data. At the iconic treasury of Petra, for instance, radar scans have recently detected the presence of previously unknown chambers and passages hidden directly behind its ornate facade, suggesting the monument is far more than a simple tomb front, perhaps the entrance to a deeper, unexplored complex. This is the new chapter of discovery where technology acts as a kind of X-ray vision, allowing us to see through rock and time. The analysis goes beyond finding new rooms. By digitally mapping the precise angle, depth, and pattern of ancient tool marks on a wall, researchers can now make astonishingly detailed inferences. They can estimate the size of the workforce, distinguish between the work of different teams or skill levels, and even reconstruct the exact sequence in which a chamber was carved, from the first rough cut to the final polish. This turns speculation into a science. What was once a question of scholarly debate, how many people worked here for how long, can now be approached with statistical models derived from the stone's own memory. This non-invasive approach is perhaps the greatest gift of these new tools. For centuries, understanding often meant excavation, which is a destructive process. Now, archaeologists can peel back layers of history virtually, preserving the site intact for future generations while still unlocking its stories. Drones flying over the dense jungles of Central America have used LiDAR to reveal vast, interconnected networks of rock-cut structures completely invisible beneath the canopy, rewriting our understanding of entire civilizations. In this way, the enigma is not being solved but deepened and refined. Each scan, each digital model adds a new layer of clarity to the ancient vision. It proves that these sites are not closed books but living puzzles. The same patience and ingenuity that carved the mountains is now being matched by a new kind of patience and ingenuity, one that listens with radio waves and sees with lasers, gently asking the stone to share the rest of its story. Even the mountains are not eternal. The same forces of wind, water, and time that the ancient builders sought to defy with their monumental labor are now the very enemies of their legacy. The permanence carved into the stone is under a slow, relentless siege. Natural erosion scours delicate carvings into blurred silhouettes, water, once managed by ingenious channels, now finds new paths through centuries-old cracks, seeping inside to foster destructive mold or freeze and expand in winter, prizing the rock apart grain by grain. In arid regions, a more insidious threat emerges: salt crystallization. Moisture evaporating from within the stone leaves behind salt crystals that grow between the mineral grains, acting like microscopic wedges that slowly, inexorably, push the surface apart until it flakes away in a process called spalling. These geological challenges are compounded by human presence. The gentle exhalation of 1,000 visitors a day raises humidity levels within sealed chambers, creating a microclimate that accelerates decay. The cumulative brush of countless hands, even with the best intentions, wears down the sharp edges of a millennia-old inscription. Preserving a structure that is part of a living cliff face is an entirely different discipline from restoring a built monument. You cannot replace a weathered section of a sculpted mountain as you would a damaged brick. The conservator's role is that of a guardian, not a restorer, focused on managing decay rather than reversing it. International teams of experts now engage in a delicate, high-stakes ballet of intervention. They install nearly invisible drainage systems to divert groundwater away from vulnerable facades. They consolidate crumbling surfaces with injections of specially formulated grouts that are chemically compatible with the original stone, strengthening it from within without altering its appearance. To combat the impact of tourism, sophisticated climate control systems might be installed to regulate humidity, and visitor routes are carefully choreographed to distribute wear and protect the most fragile areas. This ongoing, quiet battle reframes our understanding of these sites. They are not immutable relics frozen outside of time, but dynamic, vulnerable participants in a continuous geological story. Our efforts to preserve them are a modern echo of the ancient builder's own struggle, a testament to the enduring value we place on these conversations carved in stone. It is a humbling reminder that the legacy they intended for eternity now depends in part on the gentle, vigilant stewardship of our own generation. Their silent interiors hold more than echoes of ancient prayers. Beyond the carvings and the artifacts, these chambers have inadvertently become perfect vessels for preserving the natural world of the past. The very stability that protected sacred spaces from time has also safeguarded a different kind of record, one written in dust, pollen, and the faintest traces of ancient air. This transforms the architectural wonder into a scientific time capsule of extraordinary value. While the surface world changes dramatically over centuries, subjected to wind, rain, and sun, the environment deep within a sealed rock-cut chamber remains remarkably constant. The temperature and humidity barely fluctuate, creating conditions that can slow decay to a near standstill. In these quiet, dark spaces, organic materials that would have vanished in a few years outside can endure for millennia. Archaeobotanists carefully sift through the accumulated dust on the floors of long-sealed tombs or monastic cells. Within that dust, they find a hidden landscape. Microscopic pollen grains, each a perfect, durable capsule, tell a story of what grew outside the chamber's door. A predominance of olive pollen might speak of a thriving agricultural economy, while a sudden layer of weed pollen could indicate a period of land abandonment or drought. Even the smallest inhabitants of the ancient world are preserved. The remains of insects, beetles, or snails that found their way inside and never left can be identified. The specific species present are like tiny environmental indicators, revealing whether the climate outside was wet or dry, warm or cool at the time the chamber was sealed. In the most exceptional cases, such as in certain Egyptian tombs constructed to be airtight, scientists have even been able to analyze samples of trapped air, studying its composition for clues about the ancient atmosphere itself. This accidental archive offers a powerful corrective to the human-centric narrative of history. The grand carvings tell us what people believed and how they honored their rulers, but the pollen and insects tell us what they ate, what challenges they faced from the land, and how their environment shaped their lives. A sequence of chambers carved over centuries can provide a layered climate record. One level might show abundant grains from cultivated crops, painting a picture of a prosperous, stable period. A chamber from a later era might reveal a shift toward drought-resistant plants, silently documenting a time of hardship and adaptation. This data helps historians understand why a thriving rock-cut city might have been gradually abandoned, not due to war, but due to a centuries-long shift in rainfall patterns that made life unsustainable. Thus, the purpose of these spaces extends far beyond their original intent. They are no longer just tombs, temples, or refuges. They have become unique repositories of planetary memory. Each sealed doorway becomes a snapshot, freezing a moment of ecological balance, a record of a lost forest, or a testament to a changing climate. This adds a profound, unexpected layer to their significance. We now look to them not only to understand human culture, but to piece together the living, breathing world in which that culture was rooted. The mountain, it seems, was keeping a diary all along, written not in words but in the fragile, enduring dust of ages. The extraordinary nature of these chambers can sometimes feel beyond us. In the face of such silent, monumental perfection, a seductive story has emerged in popular culture, one that credits their creation not to human hands, but to visitors from the stars or a forgotten race of super beings. This narrative of ancient astronauts or lost technologies offers a tantalizing shortcut, an answer that seems to match the scale of the mystery. Yet, embracing this myth does a profound disservice to the very people whose legacy we are trying to understand. It quietly suggests that our ancestors, with the tools and knowledge of their time, were incapable of such vision. The truth, when we examine it, is not less wondrous but far more inspiring. This is a story of human triumph, written in stone by generations of ingenious, determined people. Let us walk through the logic step by step. We have already explored the tools, the simple hammer and point, the clever use of wooden wedges and water, the patient application of fire. These were not magical instruments, they were extensions of profound observation and practiced skill. We have seen the evidence of the planning, the red ochre guidelines still visible on unfinished walls, the meticulous process of working from the top down, a cognitive feat of reverse engineering. We have uncovered the social structures, the vast organized labor, the state treasuries and guilds that funded and directed these century-long projects. Every piece of the puzzle fits within the realm of known human history and capability. There is no gap in the record that requires an extraterrestrial explanation, only a gap in our own modern imagination, in our ability to conceive of such monumental patience. Dismissing the alien architect theory is not about removing the mystery from these places. On the contrary, it is about honoring the true, deeper mystery at their core. The real enigma is not how they were built, but why. Why would a society dedicate generations of labor and treasure to hollow out a mountain? The answer lies in the realms of faith, power, community, and a yearning for eternity, motivations that are profoundly, uniquely human. To attribute these works to aliens is to bypass the rich cultural meaning etched into every column and corridor. It ignores the specific gods being honored, the particular kings being glorified, the very real communities seeking shelter from very real threats. It reduces a complex tapestry of human belief and ambition to a simple special effect. The narrative of human achievement is in every way more compelling than any fiction about ancient astronauts. Consider the generational aspect alone. A master architect would draw the first lines on a cliff face, knowing he would never see the chamber completed. His son would take up the mallet, and his grandson after that, each holding the same vision in their mind's eye across decades. This is a testament to a cultural continuity and a shared purpose that feels almost unimaginable today. It speaks to a belief in legacy that outweighed individual lifespan. This is not the work of a quick visit from advanced beings. It is the work of a civilization in deep conversation with its own destiny, choosing to invest in a permanent mark on the world. Reclaiming these wonders as human achievements does not make them ordinary. It makes them sacred in a new way. They become monuments not to unknown visitors, but to the boundless potential of collaboration, planning, and will. They stand as proof that with a clear vision, organized effort, and time, humanity can perform what later ages might deem impossible. The next time you see an image of a temple carved into a cliff, do not see a mystery that needs an otherworldly solution. See a classroom, see the patient strike of a hammer, the careful line of a plumb bob, the coordinated effort of thousands. See the ultimate expression of a very human desire to create something that would speak across the millennia, a desire they fulfilled so completely that we are still listening, still learning from the silence they left behind. A freestanding temple is a dialogue with gravity, but a rock-cut chamber is a negotiation with the mountain itself. To grasp the full weight of the rock-cut achievement, we need to place it beside its magnificent counterpart, the classical freestanding monument. Both represent the pinnacle of ancient engineering, yet they spring from fundamentally different philosophies of creation. One is an act of assembly, the other an act of revelation. Each method offered a distinct set of promises and perils, guiding ancient cultures toward a strategic choice that reflected their deepest needs. Consider the inherent stability of a structure carved from the living bedrock. A freestanding temple, no matter how masterfully its stones are fitted, is a collection of separate pieces held together by gravity and friction. It is vulnerable to seismic shock, as each block can shift independently. But a chamber carved into a mountainside is part of a continuous geological mass. It moves with the mountain, giving it a profound resistance to earthquakes that assembled structures simply cannot match. This was not just an engineering benefit, it was a philosophical one, creating a space that felt as eternal and unshakable as the earth itself. The mountain also provided a superior, permanent shield from the elements. A freestanding facade is exposed on all sides to sun, wind, rain, and frost, each season slowly working to erode its surface. A rock-cut facade, sheltered by the cliff's own overhang, is protected from the direct onslaught of weather. The interior, buried deep within the stone, maintains a constant, cool temperature, naturally preserving delicate carvings and paintings from the damaging cycles of heat and humidity. This made the rock-cut form an ideal vessel for preserving not just art but intention for millennia. Symbolically, the connection was even more powerful. Building with quarried stone is a process of transformation, taking material from one place and giving it a new form elsewhere. But carving directly into a sacred mountain was an act of communion. It rooted the structure in a specific, hallowed location forever, merging cultural identity with the very geology of the homeland. A king's tomb built on a plain declares his importance, but a king's tomb carved into the side of a peak declares his authority is part of the landscape, as permanent as the horizon. Yet for all these advantages, the rock-cut method came with a monumental trade-off, a complete lack of flexibility. In freestanding construction, plans could evolve. A wing could be added, a room enlarged, a facade redesigned. The process was additive and adaptable. The rock-cut process, however, was subtractive and absolute. Once a volume of stone was removed, it was gone. There was no going back, no second chance to adjust the ceiling height or relocate a pillar. This demanded a vision of terrifying clarity and a commitment spanning generations, with no room for improvisation. This comparison is not about declaring one method superior, but about illuminating the diverse intelligence of ancient societies. their choice was a profound strategic decision. A culture prioritizing eternal security, symbolic unity with the land, and protection against the ages would lean toward the mountain. A society valuing architectural experimentation, expansive urban planning, or the ability to quickly project power in a new location would master the art of assembly. Often, we see them used in tandem within the same civilization for different purposes. The Egyptians built their luminous, pillared temples for the living in the open sun, but carved their secretive, eternal tombs for the pharaohs into the valley's cliffs. Each form served a specific functional and spiritual need. Understanding this choice deepens our respect. It shows these cultures were not following a single architectural script, but were savvy problem solvers, reading their environment, their beliefs, and their ambitions, then selecting the tool, or rather, the mountain, that would best make their vision endure. The mountain's silent lessons were never truly forgotten. The ancient impulse to carve meaning from the earth, to shape space through subtraction, has found a powerful echo in the hands of modern visionaries. While we no longer hollow out cliffs with hammer and chisel, the core principles of rock-cut architecture, its dialogue with the land, its mastery of light, its creation of profound atmosphere resonate through contemporary design, proving these are not historical curiosities, but timeless human inquiries. Look at the soaring, organic forms of Antoni Gaudi's Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. Though it rises skyward, its essence is deeply rooted in the rock-cut philosophy. Gaudi famously said his columns were inspired by forest trees, but their function is that of a natural cavern's pillars. They branch and fuse to support a stone canopy, creating an interior that feels less constructed and more discovered, as if the building were a grotto revealed from within a living hill. His use of textured, raw stone and his genius for channeling colored light through intricate openings directly parallels the ancient artistry of using geology and filtered illumination to stir emotion. This conversation with the earth takes a more literal and minimalist form in the work of Japanese architect Tadao Ando. His Church of the Light in Osaka is a masterclass in modern rock-cut thinking, though built of smooth concrete. The structure is a stark, brutalist box, but Ando's intervention is one of pure subtraction. He carved a deep, cross-shaped void into the solid concrete wall behind the altar. At dawn, sunlight slices through this perfect cut, projecting a luminous cross of light into the shadowed space. The effect is breathtakingly simple and deeply spiritual. It demonstrates the same powerful economy the ancients understood, that creating awe often relies not on adding ornament, but on removing material to harness a fundamental force like light. Ando's work consistently creates cave-like serenity, spaces of quiet introspection where the weight and texture of raw concrete evoke the solidity and cool silence of stone, guiding the visitor into a state of contemplative calm. This living legacy extends beyond houses of worship into our very approach to sustainable and site-sensitive design. The ancient builders worked with their environment because they had no other choice, but today we see their methods as a profound blueprint for ecological harmony. Modern, earth-sheltered architecture and underground homes directly descend from the defensive refuges of Cappadocia and Mesa Verde. By building into hillsides or covering structures with earth, architects can achieve remarkable energy efficiency, using the ground's constant temperature for natural heating and cooling, just as a rock-cut chamber stays cool in summer and warm in winter. The principle is identical: leverage the Earth's mass as a regulating blanket. Furthermore, the ancient commitment to a specific, perfect site has evolved into the modern design tenet of genius loci, the spirit of place. Architects now, like those ancient scouts, spend immense time studying a location's light, wind, topography, and history before drawing a single line, ensuring the building feels not placed upon the land but emerging from it. Artists, too, listen to the echo from the mountain. The American land artist Michael Heiser creates works like City, a vast, abstract complex of mounds, depressions, and structures built into the remote Nevada desert. It is a modern, monumental earthwork that requires the viewer to move through it, experiencing shifting perspectives and compressed spaces in a way that directly recalls the processional routes of rock-cut temples. His work is not built up but carved and shaped into the desert floor, a continuation of that subtractive, geological dialogue on a colossal scale. Similarly, the immersive installations of artists like James Turrell, who uses light to shape perception of space and void, engage with the same phenomenological questions that the acoustic chambers of Malta or the light shafts of Newgrange explored. How can an environment alter consciousness? This enduring influence demonstrates something beautiful and fundamental. The questions that consumed those ancient builders are not locked in the past. How do we create spaces that inspire awe? How do we use light as a material? How do we build in harmony with the planet rather than simply on it? These are inquiries that every generation must answer anew. The rock-cut chambers do not give us the answers, but they offer a masterclass in the depth of the questions. They remind us that the most powerful architecture often speaks in the language of essence, not excess. It shows us that by listening to a site, by respecting material, and by understanding the profound psychological impact of shadow, mass, and silence, we can create spaces that are not just shelters but experiences. The mountain's heart still beats in the quiet concrete chapel, in the sunken garden, and in the home that hugs a hillside, a silent testament to a human conversation with the earth that began with a hammer's strike and continues in every thoughtful line we draw upon the world. The true story of a place is often found in the questions it leaves unanswered. For all our scanning and scholarship, some chambers guard their deepest secrets with a silent, stubborn grace. Take the hypogeum of Hal Saflieni on Malta, a three-level labyrinth carved underground. We know it was a resting place as the remains of thousands were found within its softly lit halls. But its exact ritual purpose dances just beyond our grasp. The architecture itself is a riddle, with its echoing oracle chamber that transforms sound and its rooms carved to mimic the built temples above ground. Was it solely a sacred memorial site or a center for ceremonies that used resonance to bridge worlds? The stone offers no clear testimony, only a profound, engineered atmosphere that still hums with possibility. Equally haunting are the stories of sudden departure. In the vast underground city of Derinkuyu, carved deep into the soft rock of Cappadocia, life seems to have been interrupted mid-breath. Archaeologists have found grinding stones left in place, storage jars still set into floors, and hearths that appear ready for a fire. There is no evidence of conflict or collapse within the mountain. So why would an entire community seal the massive stone doors and vanish, leaving the tools of their daily existence behind? The most likely answer lies in a threat that left no mark on the stone itself, perhaps a shift in political power that made the region unsafe, or a trade route that moved and drew the population away. The abandonment feels less like a retreat and more like a planned, swift exodus, a community stepping out of its stone skin and melting into the landscape, leaving a perfect snapshot of subterranean life frozen in time. Then there are the feats of precision that quietly defy our assumptions. How did ancient builders without oscilloscopes or acoustic modeling software calibrate the sonic properties of a chamber like the treasury of Atreus? Its dome creates a reverberation that lasts for over 10 seconds, a sustained, haunting echo that would have profoundly shaped any ritual inside. The answer likely lies in a deep, intuitive mastery of geometry and material, knowledge passed down through generations of artisans who learned to listen to the stone as they carved. They understood that a specific curvature would catch and roll sound in a particular way, that a smooth surface would reflect frequencies differently than a rough one. This was a science of perception, refined not in a laboratory, but in the quiet dark of 100 other caves, where the relationship between space and sound was learned by ear and by heart. These open questions are not failures of archaeology, they are its lifeblood. A mystery solved can become a fact in a textbook, but a mystery that endures remains a conversation. It invites each new generation to look again, to ask a different question, to apply a new technology. It keeps the past from becoming a closed door. These silent chambers, for all we have learned, have not yet finished their story. They hold back a final whisper, ensuring that our dialogue with them, and with the ingenious minds that shaped them, never truly ends. These silent halls carved into mountainsides ask us a quiet, urgent question about our own lives. In a world defined by the fleeting glow of screens and the relentless chase for the next new thing, their enduring presence feels like a message from another dimension of time. They challenge the very rhythm of our modern existence, a rhythm measured in notifications and quarterly reports, not in generations. Their builders worked with a patience that seems almost alien to us now. They began projects they knew they would never see finished, trusting their children's children to complete the vision. This generational faith stands in stark contrast to our culture of instant gratification and disposable results. What does it mean to build something not for ourselves, but for a future we will never know? The chambers compel us to look at the materials of our own legacies. The ancients used stone, the most permanent substance they could command. Their medium was the earth itself. Our modern world builds with different materials, with data streams, digital platforms, and intellectual property. These can spread ideas with incredible speed, but their permanence is questionable. A server farm is not a mountain. A social media post does not echo like a carved dome. The contrast is not about declaring one medium superior, but about prompting a deeper consideration. What are we investing in that will truly endure? Are we building sandcastles at the edge of a digital tide, or are we patiently carving spaces for meaning that might shelter those who come after us? Beyond the physical, these spaces mirror our spiritual and creative ambitions. They were not made for efficiency. They were made for awe, for connection, for touching something larger than the individual self. In our optimized lives, where every minute is accounted for and every action is meant to yield a measurable return, the rock-cut chamber represents a different kind of value. It is value measured in wonder, in communal identity, in a dialogue with the cosmos. It asks us what we are making room for in the architecture of our own days. Are we carving out spaces for silence and reflection, or are we letting the noise of the world fill every crack? The sheer physicality of their creation also speaks to us. These builders engaged with the natural world directly, with their hands and their tools, reading the grain of the stone and the angle of the sun. Their work was an intimate, demanding conversation with reality. In an age where so much of our experience is mediated, filtered, and virtual, their achievement reminds us of the profound satisfaction and meaning that comes from direct, tangible creation. It is a call to remember the feeling of making something real, of solving a problem not with a click, but with patience and craft. Ultimately, these enigmatic chambers are more than historical artifacts, they are philosophical waypoints. They do not offer easy answers, but they frame essential questions about time, purpose, and our place in a long human story. To stand before them, even in imagination, is to feel the weight of centuries and the lightness of a single human life within that span. It is a humbling and strangely liberating perspective. They remind us that while our individual time is brief, our capacity to contribute to something lasting is immense. They invite us to consider what we, in our own way, might choose to reveal from the raw stone of our time. What spaces of beauty, truth, or sanctuary we might dare to carve, not for applause tomorrow, but for a whisper of understanding that might linger long after we are gone. The final stroke of the ancient hammer did not end the conversation, it merely passed it to us. From that first, irrevocable strike into the cliff face to the last beam of solstice light illuminating a sacred statue, the story of rock-cut chambers is humanity's most patient and profound dialogue with the earth itself. We have traced the arc of this conversation, from the raw physics of fire setting and leverage to the delicate artistry of subtractive vision. We have walked through their echoing purposes as eternal homes for gods and ancestors, as ingenious fortresses for the living, and as silent observatories tuned to the turning heavens. These are not mere holes in a hill, they are deliberate, monumental statements of belief, ambition, and community, etched permanently into the very skin of the planet. Their enduring enigma speaks not to a lack of answers, but to the limitless depth of the questions our ancestors dared to ask. Their mystery is a celebration of human creativity at its most resilient and far-seeing. So the next time you walk on solid ground, remember that beneath the surface of our world, in the cool, silent dark, there are stories waiting in the stone. They are quiet reminders of what we can achieve when we work with the earth across generations toward a vision greater than any single lifetime. If this journey into the depths has sparked your curiosity, there are countless more historical puzzles to explore. Subscribe to continue uncovering the wonders hidden in plain sight, and let us know in the comments which of these enigmatic sites from Petra to Ellora captures your imagination most of all.